Radio.com.
Good day with your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw. First with the highlights. A Jamaican man has been arrested on a marijuana farm at Batnabaklis, East Coast, Demerara. Mr. Joseph Harmon may step down from the post of opposition leader this afternoon. In the region, some secondary school students in Trinidad and Tobago are to return to face-to-face classes from next month. And internationally, President Joe Biden has threatened to impose sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin if Russia invades Ukraine. The details of these stories and more in just a moment.
Advertise with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM for best coverage on programs on motivation, beauty and health, parenting and relationships, knowing your rights, and a variety of enlightening content, and get value for your money. Call our helpful staff today on 223-1056 or 223-1041 today.
Now for the news in detail. A Jamaican man was Wednesday in custody after he was allegedly caught on a half-acre marijuana farm at Nabaklis, East Coast, Demerara. The Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit, KANU, said that during the operation on Tuesday, a shotgun, several types of ammunition, a crossbow, and several arrows were also seized at the location. He has been identified as a 46-year-old Winston Thompson. KANU said its agents found about 5,000 cannabis plants and seedlings, processed cannabis, and 1 kilogram of mixed seeds. The anti-drug agency said it continues to conduct their operations around the country aimed at dismantling the networks that are engaged in the cultivation, sale, as well as distribution of narcotics. Mr. Joseph Harmon may be resigning from the post of opposition leader later today. Well-placed sources in the coalition of a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU plus AFC, say that efforts are underway to swear in another opposition parliamentarian to succeed Mr. Harmon. Talk of Mr. Harmon stepping down as opposition leader comes a day after he demitted office as General Secretary of APNU. Mr. David Granger also stepped down as chairman of APNU, and he was succeeded by People's National Congress Reform PNCR leader Aubrey Norton. The PNCR's executive has already decided that Mr. Norton should become the opposition leader. Mr. Granger remains the representative of the list of candidates for APNU plus AFC. Previously, Mr. Roysdale Ford had performed the duties of opposition leader in the absence of Mr. Harmon. More recently, Mr. Ford represented the opposition leader in talks with the Commonwealth Secretary General Baroness Patricia Scotland. The leader of the People's National Congress Reform, Aubrey Norton, was Tuesday elected chairman of the Umbrella, a Partnership for National Unity, APNU, after Mr. David Granger stepped down. APNU General Secretary Joseph Harmon also stepped down as the General Secretary of that loosely knit coalition of the PNCR, the major party, and several small and little-known parties. In a statement, APNU says that the two informed the first APNU Executive Council meeting for this year of their decision to demit office. Sources, however, said that Mr. Granger will remain the representative of the list of candidates for APNU plus AFC and so far Mr. Harmon remains Guyana's opposition leader. It is left to be seen whether Mr. Harmon, not being a PNCR executive member or General Secretary of APNU, will resign from the post of opposition leader. However, Mr. Granger demitted office with immediate effect, paving the way for the election of a new chair. President Irfan Ali says that the 2022 national budget includes money to cushion the impact of rising cost of living, but indicates that it will not be unconditional cash grants. He was addressing the nation last night ahead of the preparation of the budget at 2 p.m. today. The president stopped short of saying that the money would not be distributed across Guyana as yet another unconditional cash grant, but this time around would be based on assessments.
I've asked the Minister of Finance to set aside a sizable allocation to address issues of cost of living. And this sizable allocation will be used through consultation with communities across the country to identify specific ways and initiatives in which we can deploy this budgeted allocation to ease the burden on the population.
President Ali also hints that personal income tax will be reduced.
I've also advised the Minister of Finance to look at the personal income tax of taxpayers and to make necessary adjustment in keeping with the budgetary framework and the affordability of the country at this moment.
President Irfan Ali. Shadow Natural Resources Minister David Patterson and Public Works Minister Juan Edgell are at odds over whether Guyana really needs so much electricity that will be generated by the natural gas power plant. Mr. Patterson says that a study conducted by the Inter-American Development Bank in 2016 and updated in 2019 says Guyana's energy demand will be 330 megawatts by 2035. He says the government has projected power demand for the Demerara-Berbice interconnected system will be 415 megawatts or an additional 290 megawatts in the next 3 years. Kicking off debate on a motion on the proposed $1.5 billion gas-to-shore facility at Wales, West Bank Demerara, Mr. Patterson said that the government has not provided any evidence showing that Guyana can consume all of that electricity.
However, sir, they have failed to inform the country which industries will be requiring this power. In other words, they are committing the people of Guyana to building a power plant, committing more than $1.5 billion, but they have no end users. As a country, we will be paying for electricity which we cannot currently utilize, since this supply is nearly 3 times the current demand.
But Public Works Minister Juan Edgell says that housing areas and economic activities which will be opened up across Guyana will consume the electricity.
What we would have done, Mr. Speaker, the gas-to-shore project is just one item in a menu of measures for the transformation of Guyana, but it is a very important item because the main cry of the people of Guyana to see Guyana transform and develop, and the hindrance to that over the years has been the cost of electricity. Public
Works Minister Juan Edgell. The United States has been telling the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Prison Service that they may not be able to receive American assistance if they violate human rights. The U.S. Embassy says that the Department of State's Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor trained members of the police force and the prison service. According to the embassy, the training focused on the Department of State's Leahy Law, which prohibits state assistance to foreign security forces if there is credible information that a security force unit has committed a gross violation of human rights. These include extrajudicial killings, torture, forced disappearance, or rape under the color of law. The U.S. mission here says that the training reviewed definitions of grave violation of human rights, the consequences of committing them, and the pathways to remediating units whose members have committed these actions so they may once again receive assistance. Through the United States Caribbean Basin Security Initiative, CBSI, the U.S. Embassy has facilitated the training of 889 police officers in various law enforcement areas. These include major case management, forensic video analysis, narcotics investigations, and intelligence gathering. The embassy says the U.S. is poised to facilitate more than a dozen training opportunities in 2022. The most recent training, the American Embassy says, is an example of the U.S. government's commitment to working with Guyanese security forces in promoting respect and protection of human rights in policing. The Health Ministry says that 10 more persons died from COVID-19 over the past 5 days. Most of them were over 60 years. The vaccination status of 4 of them was not known. 3 of them were not vaccinated, 2 were fully vaccinated, and 1 partly vaccinated. The Health Ministry says that of the 163 hospitalized persons, 20 are in the intensive care unit. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony stresses the need for persons to be fully vaccinated, including the booster, so that they can defend themselves against the Omicron variant.
This can all be prevented if people come out and get their vaccinations, first, second, or booster shots. And against Omicron, it's better for you to get all 3. The first one, the second one, and then get the booster, because without which you're not going to be protected. So I really want to urge people to do that. As you would see in the last couple of days, we would have seen an increase in hospitalization. It's going up gradually. But apart from the hospitalization, we are seeing that people are ending up with a severe form of COVID, and some of them have died from COVID.
Those ordered to isolate themselves at home now total at 12,682. Guyana now has legislation governing organ transplants. Already hospitals here have been transplanting kidneys, heart, and cornea. Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says that with the passage of the organ transplant bill last night, Guyana now follows Trinidad and Tobago in becoming the second CARICOM state to have such a law. He says it is important that Guyana has such a law.
It is important because since 2008, we've started to do kidney transplants. And then in 2014, we started doing corneal transplants. So this bill paves the way now to do it in a very structured way, using all the international best practices. And the hope is that once we have structured it this way, that instead of just doing corneal and kidney transplants, that we'll also be able to do other types of transplants.
Under the law, persons must give permission for their organs to be transplanted. In the case of a dead person, the next of kin will have to give permission. Now for the news in the region. The Trinidad and Tobago government says secondary school students in forms 1 to 3 will be required to attend classes at least twice a week when schools reopen for physical classes on February 7. They are away from physical classrooms due to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Education said that those students will be allowed to resume face-to-face classes on a rotational basis from February 7. The Trinidad and Tobago Ministry said there would also be a relaxation of the school uniform rules, particularly with types and colors of shoes. It said that the details of this arrangement for each school will be communicated to parents and students by principals. The Education Ministry says all students should be required to attend school physically at a minimum of 2 days per week and 5 days in a 10-day cycle. In addition, secondary school students who are not rostered for physical attendance are to be assigned assignments. In Barbados, the Unity Workers Union, UWU, is claiming that student nurses are filling in for dozens of healthcare workers who continue their strike action over outstanding grievances. The union says this is potentially putting patients at risk. The chairman of the UWU Nurses Division, Gillian Dorrich, said that unlicensed nurses were filling the gap at polyclinics and other state-owned healthcare institutions. Barbados Today reached out to Chief Medical Officer Dr. Kenneth George, to address the claim, but he would only say that the issue was engaging the attention of the Ministry of Health and he could not comment any further. Meanwhile, Dorrich said the frustrated nurses who have been on strike for 8 weeks are requesting a meeting with Director General, Human Resources Ministry of Public Service, Gail Atkins, to discuss solutions to long-standing issues that have led to the industrial action. Those issues include increased pay, health insurance, improved nurse-to-patient ratios, remuneration for degrees, and continuous training. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro says that a proposed amendment to the Constitution being drafted by the government along with Congress will pave the way for a reduction of federal and state taxes on fuel, electricity, and cooking gas. With the measure, which comes in a presidential election year, the president aims to reduce the price of basic items that have weighed heavily on Brazilian consumers and pushed inflation up to 10% at the end of 2021, its highest annual rate since 2015. In a tweet, Bolsonaro said the constitutional amendment will allow both the president and governors to reduce or eliminate taxes on diesel, gasoline, and ethanol, as well as electricity tariffs and cooking gas. Bolsonaro has long blamed governors for high fuel prices due to local taxes. Last week, he indicated the proposed amendment would be presented at the return of the parliamentary recess scheduled for next week. And lastly in the region, a U.S. offer to loosen sanctions against Venezuela's government is not indefinite and would be reversed if the ruling party does not return to talks with the opposition. This is according to opposition leader Juan Guaido. In October, delegates from the administration of President Nicolas Maduro backed out of talks meant to provide a solution to the country's long-running political and economic crisis. This was after Venezuelan government envoy Alex Saab was extradited by Cape Verde to the United States on money laundering charges. The opposition has repeatedly called for a restart to the negotiations. On the other hand, the U.S. has said previously it is serious about the revising sanctions if there are changes in Venezuela, but also serious about possibly adding additional sanctions if not. Here now is your international news coming from the BBC.
I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has insisted he won't resign as the country waits for the release of an official report into parties held at Downing Street during coronavirus lockdowns. Facing questions during a stormy session in the House of Commons, Mr Johnson said he had not yet seen the report, which he said would be published in full. Here's Rob Watson.
Boris Johnson is a man absolutely determined to fight tooth and nail to keep his job as Prime Minister and as leader of the Conservative Party. And it's very obvious the way he's decided to do that is to say attack is the best form of defence. Attack the opposition, defend your record, and try and make that point to Conservative MPs that, look, stick with this, right? Eventually the country will move on from Partygate and cakes and all that sort of stuff. So just hold your nerve and get behind me.
The opposition leader, Keir Starmer, accused the government of showing contempt for the principles of decency, honour and respect. Meanwhile, Foreign Office emails have emerged suggesting Boris Johnson did authorise the evacuation of animals from Afghanistan during the Taliban takeover. He's previously denied intervening to prioritise animals in the care of a charity at a time when so many people were desperate to leave Kabul. Ukraine's foreign minister has played down concerns that a Russian invasion may be imminent, saying there weren't enough forces for a large-scale offensive. James Waterhouse reports from Kyiv.
Ukraine's foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba concedes he doesn't know whether there'll be a war or not, but is keen to stress their army is stronger than it was 8 years ago when Crimea was first annexed by Russia, as well as the claim that 100,000 Russian troops isn't enough for a full-scale offensive. Moscow has reacted angrily to President Biden's threat to impose personal sanctions on President Putin if he decides to invade, and accused the West of pumping Ukraine with weapons.
Kurdish-led forces say they've retaken full control of a prison in northeastern Syria following nearly a week of clashes with Islamic State fighters. Here's Richard Hamilton.
Gweiran prison in the city of Hasakeh was thought to hold around 3,500 IS inmates when the initial attack was first launched last Thursday. It was the jihadists' most high-profile military operation since the loss of their caliphate nearly 3 years ago. The ensuing siege and clashes left more than 180 people dead. With US and other foreign forces stepping in to support Kurdish elite units, the neighbourhood around the prison was secured and the besieged militants inside started turning themselves in. The United Nations had been urging safe passage for more than 700 children in the prison.
World News from the BBC. A protest has been held in Sudan in support of the military to denounce efforts by the UN to resolve the political crisis. The demonstrators, many of them bussed in, gathered outside the UN office in Khartoum to condemn what they called outside interference. Earlier this month, the UN began a mediation effort, but has stressed it's not imposing any options on the Sudanese. The Red Cross says it's delivered its first shipment of medical aid in 5 months to the war-torn Ethiopian region of Tigray. This follows pledges by the federal authorities to facilitate humanitarian airlifts. Kalkidan Yibaltal reports from Addis Ababa.
The news is a rare glimmer of hope for war-ravaged Tigray. The North Ethiopian region continues to suffer from shortages of essential supplies 15 months into the conflict. The ICRC's health coordinator in the country said the development was a huge relief. The first air shipment, which included essential drugs, arrived in the Tigrayan capital Mekelle on Wednesday, and the ICRC plans to arrange more flights in the coming days as well as send convoys on road. The ICRC has previously said shortages of basic supplies have forced doctors in Tigray to reuse gloves and surgical equipment, while the World Health Organization said it had not been permitted to send medical supplies since May last year.
The American tech giant Intel has won its appeal against a $1.2 billion fine imposed in an antitrust case brought by the European Commission. Analysts say the verdict is a major setback for EU competition regulators. The Thai Navy has been called in to help contain an oil spill that threatens some of Thailand's best beaches. The leak occurred in an underwater pipeline off Rayong province, spilling crude oil into the sea. The pipeline has now been fixed and the cleanup started. Much of Thailand's economy is built around tourism. BBC News.
And that was your international news. Here now is a recap of the highlights. A Jamaican man has been arrested on a marijuana farm in the backless East Coast Demerara. Mr. Joseph Harmon may step down from the post of opposition leader this afternoon. In the region, some secondary school students in Trinidad and Tobago are to return to face-to-face classes from next month. And internationally, President Joe Biden has threatened to impose sanctions on Russian President Vladimir Putin if Russia invades Ukraine. And that was your major newscast. I am Jessica Daw.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.